Hello, welcome to Multiplexes, a video podcast series that reflects on the arts ecosystem, particularly the physical, socioeconomic, and psychological dimensions, so as to seek affinities and foster empathy among us. In the first of 3 episodes, we looked into the working space of artists, otherwise known as the artist studio, to find out what is conducive yet lacking in terms of infrastructure for creativity. That was followed by episode 2, where we explored how to nurture healthy conversations among artists and how they relate with money. In today's final episode, titled Artistic Complexes, we'll be moving from the outside in into the emotional worlds of artists. Art is considered by many as a deeply spiritual or emotional endeavor. For this reason, perhaps, the work that artists do tend to reflect a lot of the artist's sentiments or sentiments of the community, as well as engaging personal and collective memory and experiences. Perhaps along this vein, artists are perceived as very much in touch with their feelings, and that the work that they do can open up new ways to feel or to unwind or even heal. But what if things are not so straightforward, right? What if artists are human?
Well,
Yeah.
they are.
They are. We are. And that there could be a lot of psychological complexities that we are experiencing. So we want to ask questions like, how do artists manage their psychological complexities? How do their emotional worlds unfold in our very uniquely Singaporean arts ecosystem? Simply put, do artists need to go for therapy? My name is Michael Lee. I'm a Singapore-based artist and curator. And with me today at Singapore Art Museum is Rosie McGowan, and we'll be addressing these questions and more on the topic of artists and their mental health. So Rosie, I know you are both a certified counsellor as well as an applied theatre practitioner. What do these words mean? What do you exactly do in each of these roles?
So, as an applied theatre practitioner, I guess the simplest way to describe it is I use elements of drama and elements of theatre to create spaces for conversations, explorations, and to allow people the chance to explore issues or concerns that may be relevant to them, often in non-theatrical settings. I've worked with teachers to explore basically how to better support young people in a mental health crisis. You know, you can work with anybody from any community using drama methodologies or devising methodologies to create a show, for example. But the focus is always on the process rather than the product.
What about the certified counsellor part? Is that the same as therapist or psychologist?
No, not quite. There are these really delicate lines. So in Singapore, as far as I know, there's no difference between saying you're a counsellor or a therapist. In America, they're very particular about the terms that you use. Basically, I did a 2-year or just less than 2-year master's program that was specifically about counselling and taught me various tools, various counselling tools and methodologies that I could use with clients. And then I had to do almost 300 clinical hours or 300 hours with either with clients or doing paperwork or research or whatever, which is part of the certification. Psychologists go a lot deeper than that and, you know, can really like diagnose like mental health conditions. Psychiatrists can dispense medication. So I guess counsellors are like the most basic kind of person that you can go to for support with your mental and emotional health. Basic maybe may have been the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Thanks for the sharing. And I understand that you are very much an artist as well in theatre, and we'll definitely touch on that later. But let's start with something very basic, which is to define a word that has been recurrent in the series, or at least has been appearing a bit too much, maybe. I'm talking about the word complex. For the layperson, I think complex basically is a kind of synonym for certain personality traits. Like, let's say, someone who seems to have low self-esteem, we might call this person as having inferiority complex, right? And of course, the opposite personality could be superiority complex. But there are a lot of common complexes around. But let's start with the basic. What is complex in psychological terms? And what does a complex do?
Okay, the way that I understand it is it's like a housing structure. It's a building structure that we kind of keep similar memories and experiences and thoughts and feelings about something that's happened to us in. So if I have an inferiority complex, then perhaps the experiences that I've had in my life have given me the message that I don't have value, or that I don't have worth, or that I am inferior to somebody else. So for example, maybe I grew up being told by my parents that I'm not enough, I need to do better, I'm not like your cousins or your sister or whatever. And so that then forms a way that we approach the world in order to protect ourselves from feeling this way again, or protect us from experiencing these feelings that are often quite painful. So I guess it's like an adaptation, and all of us do it in some way, shape or form.
I really like the analogy with housing, because I think it points to how a psychological complex is a little bit like architecture, where there are structural elements, there are rooms where we keep certain experiences, and which could lead to beliefs, which could be lifelong, for the better or worse. And I think that also points to the idea that every human is a complex being.
Yeah.
If not for anything else, that they have personal experiences, but also they are part of society. So there are probably a lot of instances of interactions between the self and the outside world. How do we identify a complex? Are there signs of a complex? And what are common complexes, let's say, other than inferiority complex?
I'm going to turn this around. Okay. I'm going to offer you a question.
You're allowed to.
So I guess for me, the question would be, what would be the purpose of identifying it for you? What would that give you? How would that help you understand yourself in connection with your bigger world, right? Every part of my life has informed who I am today. I am the person I am because of the way that I've been brought up, not just by my family, but by the various countries and cultures that I've lived in. And so is it important for me to understand what my complexes are so that I can then change them? Do I understand them so that I have a better understanding of myself? Do I want to understand them so that I can go, actually, this isn't a helpful way that I live my life because it's affecting my relationships with people, it's affecting my work, it's affecting, various other things. And so therefore I want to try and change it. Or is it about further kind of boxing ourselves in and going, oh, well, if I have this, then there's almost no point in carrying on. You know what I mean? Or am I using it as an excuse for things? I know that I haven't answered your question, but I guess that's where my curiosity is. Like, often when people want to talk about things like this, like these kind of defining terms that can often feel quite limiting, my question is, how will understanding this help you in the greater context of your life?
Perhaps I can use myself as the case study. I realized that my early work were very much characterized by three things. One, that it's craft heavy. It's always often involved me working with paper, cutting it, sculpting it, basically very skillful. And then the next one is kind of conceptual underpinning. And then the third one is, because of these first two, conceptual as well as craft or skills heavy, it's also very space reliant, right? Because I would be making three-dimensional paper sculptures that need space to make and store. But at one point I realized that things were kind of too much. And as I started reading up on psychological papers and articles, I realized that I might have this complex in terms of needing to show that I'm skillful. And as I trace backwards, I do remember for the longest time when I was young, I would be very affected when people ask me why I'm so lazy. Yeah. So I think I've been trying my whole life to avoid that kind of questions or remark. Maybe I have a hard working complex, right? Slave complex. I don't know. The other one is I remember fearing the word stupid being imposed on me or being thrown at me. And that might have led me to trying to make conceptual work, right? That it's going to circulate in international Biennale circuits, for example. So I guess becoming aware of these, maybe I could call them chips on my shoulder, was at the same time relieving, but also the self-awareness doesn't always solve the problem. Yeah, sometimes too much self-awareness is bad as well. What are the causes of a complex? Is it trauma? Could complexes be caused by happiness, happy moments?
Good question. Yeah, good question. I think how we are in the world is caused by all of those things, right? I think we don't call them complexes if they're happy moments, because the word complex is, complex, right? It has a sort of negativity to it. Interestingly, I wonder if that's why I steer away from using that word. But even just what you've said, right? Like how you were raised, what you were told when you were younger, you have worked hard to avoid being called lazy. The artwork that you create is detailed and skilled. So how nobody can possibly call you lazy, because look how hardworking you must be to have to create that, right? And interestingly, wanting to avoid being called stupid has meant that there's a lot of cerebral knowledge and application in the work that you do, which is also, just noticing that, right? Like you're trying to avoid, the sting and the hurt that comes with being called lazy and stupid. Just even on that, right? Like these various people and exchanges that you've had in your life have meant that you have adapted to try and avoid the pain of being called lazy, which actually may have nothing to do with you and who you are as a person. I mean, clearly don't, right? You are clearly a very hardworking person. And maybe there's a part of you that now that's heard that from me is like, oh, cool, I'm hardworking. And that's okay, right? But for us, it's like, can we just notice that so that we can then make the choice to do something different if that's what we want, right? If that's what we want to do. Can I acknowledge the fact that actually I don't have to create these, elaborate paper structures that are very skilled in order to be skillful and in order to be hardworking. And I can approach what I do in a different way that still has value, because I'm doing this with a conscious awareness of the fact that what I was doing before was to avoid being called this. But now I know that if somebody's calling me lazy, that's their own stuff. And instead, I know that I'm hardworking and I can take the work in the direction that I'd like to. So we have more agency and more ability to make that choice, more power.
A lot of these, let's say, life choices and the way we think, feel, and behave in relation to early experiences could be very much about trying to live for the other rather than for the self.
Yes.
And that can be really tiring.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. And it makes sense, right? Like when we are kids, we need to be living for the people who are going to keep us alive. We need to be doing things that people are going to be rewarding us for, or, you know, meaning that they'll feed us if we are this way or whatever. And so we adapt the way that we are in order to be able to survive. And one of the things about like our teenage selves is, you know, for a lot of teenagers, that's the point where they go, "Ooh, who am I? Who am I? Like outside of you, parents, and who am I outside of society? And, you know, I'm going to try and work that out." And when you're given that space to explore, while still knowing you've got a safe space to go back to, that can give you, you know, wonderful things, and you can really work out who you are, independent of or interrelated to your parents and society. But if you don't have that because you're told you need to be a good girl or a good boy, or you need to get good grades or whatever it may be, then you don't have that. Or if you're told you're lazy because you're not living up to somebody else's expectations, then you adapt yourself accordingly, because this is what we've learned to do. So part of our, I guess, natural progression as human beings is to work out who am I, just for myself. And of course, I'm very aware of the fact that I say this with privilege and, you know, with the acknowledgement that if you are just trying to survive, and if you're just trying to feed yourself or put a roof over your head, that's not something that you can necessarily do.
Maybe we can zoom into one particular type of complex, which is the title of this episode, artistic complex. What might an artistic complex look like? I'm asking this question because someone like Carl Jung, who is known for popularizing the term complex, might have an initial answer, because he has this concept called the art complex. And apparently, Jung has this high regard for the arts in its different forms. He would use the analogy of a plant to describe poetry as something that is supra-personal or superhuman even, like a plant or animal that can't help but grow, and that its growth is not directly or fully dependent on its environment or the soil, right? That it will find whatever way to survive. Interestingly, he also offered a caveat that where he assumes that the work of an artist is not purely personal, it's not a personal triumph, but that imbued with the work of art is actually a collection of community, cultural, and social beliefs, myths, and legends. So that's art complex for Jung.
I think he's right in that it's not just about the personal. I don't think anything we do is just about the personal. It really is a response to our wider world. It really is a response to how we were raised. It's a response to the people that we grew up with, to our communities, even if it's not a conscious one. Yeah, I don't think you can create anything, let alone art, any kind of art, without being informed by who you are and the world that you grew up in. I don't think that's possible.
Experiences that led me to have a positive feeling towards art. I think it would be during kindergarten time when I was praised only during art lessons, right? Because everybody else would just dab some paint on that paper and then they run off to play, right? But I would be there all the time, hardworking.
Yeah.
And I would be praised. And honestly speaking, I'm not sure whether I'm grateful for the praise now, because I think that led me to this affinity with the arts. And I wonder if my artistic complex actually started from that time.
And I think it's really interesting that you had this experience in kindergarten where you were praised for being so hardworking. And then, even just this knowledge and awareness that, there was a kind of need, even if it was a subconscious need, to be seen as being hardworking. And here was someone who actively saw you as being hardworking. And, maybe that is, the journey that you took. Maybe that was the reason for it. Maybe there were a bunch of other reasons. I don't think it's necessarily just the one. But isn't that interesting that was the experience you had?
That's interesting because this affinity or my preference for my identity as being a hard-working artist has its flip side, right? I get tired all the time. That really makes me rethink whether any form of affinity or identity is purely positive one way or the other. Talking about the fact that we are both personal and also social beings, I'm interested to discuss the topic of artist stereotypes. There are many stereotypes around. I think one binary that is very common is the happy and unhappy artist, right? The unhappy artist sometimes has synonyms like the tortured artist or the starving artist, perhaps exemplified by someone like Vincent van Gogh, and he is kind of placed on the opposite end of the continuum where someone like Picasso, exuberant, confident, and successful in his lifetime, would occupy. Does a stereotype about these artists reflect certain negative experience, you think? How much do you think that the struggle and unhappiness that artists experience, how much do you think these are self-inflicted or socially imposed? That leads me to this maxim that I have overheard from artist A talking about artist B, like, oh, he or she is going to get married, he's going to be happy, and then the art will suffer. Almost as if, quality of art and level of happiness are inversely proportional.
Yep, I've heard very similar things. Okay, first of all, so many questions in there. I barely know where to start, right? I think there's that great awareness that we don't have to exist in either of the binaries. We don't. We're human beings. We have a whole host of experiences in between both of those things. When we're in pain and when we are struggling at a point in our lives, one of the things that often really helps is to create art. It's something that allows us to process our feelings without having to necessarily talk about what has happened, right? Whether that is painting something, writing something, writing a play, writing a song, drawing something. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's a way of us putting stuff out there. And it's a method and a tool of healing, again, without having to go into, this is exactly what happened to me. And I think that's one of the one of the most beautiful things about art. There doesn't have to be a right or a wrong. We're just putting out our feelings. We're putting out what's going on. And I think that people see themselves in that. So again, I don't have to know what you've been through to be able to connect to an experience via your artwork. Whether that experience is accurate or not, doesn't matter. It's bringing something up in me. And when we're in pain, one of the really helpful things is to feel connected. So then if I can feel connected to this song or this poem or this piece of art that was done when somebody else was in pain, you know, I'm going to want more of it or whatever. And so I think, you know, sometimes maybe that fuels the two. But I think you can still create good art when you're in a good space. It's just maybe different as well. And then what messages are we fed about good art? You know, or what messages are we fed about when we create art? You know, are people telling us that our art is better when we are tortured? But why is that the case? You know, and actually, like, if you think about, and there's so many levels of torture, right? There's like emotional torture, like financial torture. Like if I'm in a space where I don't have access to everything, maybe I'm then a bit more creative about how I put my art out or what materials I use or anything like that, which then brings up a whole new thing for people who are consuming this, you know, or who are looking at it. But I don't think you have to be in one of these two places in order to create good. I don't think you have to be tortured to create good art. I think that's a very difficult place to exist in. And if you know that you're in that place, why wouldn't you want to get out of it? It's very, very hard being in the space of torture.
That makes me wonder, in your day job, in your counseling work, do you have clients who are in the creative field?
Yes.
Okay. Nice. Among your creative or artistic clients, are there recurrent themes in their experiences and their struggles? Are there some things that are quite unique to the profession of art, or others which are more universal that cuts across different professions?
Yes, there are. Like, universally, people have struggles with worth, value, feeling enough, connection to people, struggles within intimate relationships, friendships, family. People have very common experiences about how they were raised, and the impact that that has on them now. There are some very unique struggles to people in the artist or the art community, working so many different jobs, constant rejection, you know, that's huge. And how do you deal with that and process that and let that go and know that it's not about who you are? And again, it almost doesn't matter what kind of artist you are or what kind of art you do. It's never enough to just do one thing. And it's interesting that you called this my day job. Are you my mother?
I could be.
But you know, isn't that interesting, right?
Yeah.
That we see, even as artists, we see, oh, one job is more important than the other, or this is your day job, or this is your main job. And often it's the job that earns you the money so that you can keep doing the art. And so also that is a very unique struggle as an artist, because then does that make me less of an artist? You know, does it mean that if I have a job teaching, then am I actually less of an artist than somebody who just is an artist full-time? I don't know any artists who are artists full-time and have been able to be artists full-time their entire career. You know, there's always something extra that's been picked up, extra things they're doing. You know, they're not just painting, they're doing other things too. You know, because what do you do in between the shows, right? What do you do if you aren't represented by somebody? What do you do if you're still in the process of making music and, you know, or a show or writing a musical and you don't get paid to write the musical? you know? Now I'm speaking for myself. But it's that thing, and then what has more value? And what do we value more? And so I guess those things are very unique to artists a lot of the time, or at least, you know, the artists that I work with, and also myself. I put myself into this too, you know, and understanding what it's like to work so hard on something. Like, I work so hard on an audition. I bring it to someone and they're like, "You're not right for this role." Like, and it's not because I wasn't good, it's because my look wasn't right, or I didn't have the right chemistry with this one person, or whatever it is. You know, or I worked so hard on a proposal, you know, for a commission work, and they go, "Oh, we've decided to go with somebody else." And how do I know intrinsically that I still have value when the thing that I do, that I put so much of myself into, is not, you know, appears to not have value to somebody else, which again isn't necessarily the case, but I'm being rejected for all the hard work that I've put in. And this often doesn't happen in a lot of other jobs, right? The hard work that I put in, it's like, okay, yeah, we'll do this project, we'll go with this, we'll whatever, you know. But with artists, they don't just do it once, they're doing it again and again and again and again in so many different ways, across so many different platforms, that can get very exhausting.
What can I expect to do in a session with you? And what kind of outcomes can I expect from having a session with you or any other counsellor?
Okay, so if we're talking about counselling, and if we're talking about therapy, one-on-one therapy, it really depends on the therapist. But for me, one of the things that you can expect is a better and deeper understanding of you. You can expect to work creatively in some kind of way, because that's how I work, and also have some kind of cognitive input in terms of understanding your thoughts better, and understanding how your thoughts affect your feelings and behavior, while also having your attention drawn to maybe your breath or your body, and making those connections, hopefully in quite a deep way. And hopefully you will gain some compassion for yourself, and the ability to really recognize, you know, that you are a person with value and worth, who deserves to be loved.
Nice. So I appreciate that sharing of how I could work with someone like you for self-understanding. But I am conscious of myself sounding like a potential customer of a hair salon, asking the hairdresser, you know, like, should I get a haircut? And of course, I should be getting a haircut, right? But now I want to turn it around by asking if I want to do my own haircut.
Yeah.
In this context, I'm saying, if I want to do my own therapy, I want to understand myself better through my own means, right?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to an artist like that who is hoping to acknowledge and manage their own complexes?
First of all, I think that's great. I think that's a very brave thing to do. It's a very, very brave thing to do. Like, when we start to work at understanding ourselves, it can be a very scary thing, right? Because there are lots of feelings involved, and some of these feelings are very unpleasant. There is an understandable desire to do it on your own, for a variety of reasons. Some of them are financial reasons, some of them are practical reasons. A lot of our wounding happens in relation to other people. And so ideally our healing happens in relation to other people. So sometimes that may be a friend, right? You've got a friend who is able to hold space for you, is able to listen to you, is able to not necessarily give you advice, tell you what to do, etc., but just really kind of hold that, be there for you, be there with you. And that's great, because again, you'll experience healing within that, within yourself, because you're experiencing it in relation to somebody. Sometimes if you're lucky, it's a family member who's able to do that for you. Often if somebody would rather do this on their own, then that tells me that there is a relational wounding that's quite deep, which makes me feel like I can't trust anyone or depend on anyone. And so I would encourage you to maybe explore that and to see if there's any way that you could potentially do this with somebody else. Because really that's where a lot of the healing, that's where the deep healing comes from. You can start with things on your own and that's fine, but some of the deeper stuff may need to happen often needs to happen in relation to somebody else. I recommend, if you are starting on your own, I recommend, reading books, listening to podcasts. Again, if you feel that you can get support from friends or from family, reaching out to them and letting them know. I recommend journaling. I recommend an art practice. I recommend an art practice in some way to almost everybody who I work with. Like, even if that art practice is journaling and like the journaling is just scribbling down words or like, drawing out shapes, right? It doesn't have to look like anything, mean anything, represent anything. It's just a way of putting stuff out that doesn't necessarily require words. Incorporating exercise, looking at your diet, like looking at your sleep, all of those things are really good ways that you can initially help yourself. Ultimately, if you feel that at some point you come to a position where you'd like to go deeper but you don't know how, or you're feeling a bit stuck, to see if you can reach out to somebody. You don't have to be in therapy forever. The goal is to not be in therapy forever, and being in therapy, like I think it's like 70 or 75% of successful therapy is about your relationship with the therapist, which is really interesting as well, isn't it? Right? It's like, a much smaller percentage is the modality they use and all. It's like, but really, it's like your relationship with them.
Thanks for that sharing, because one of the aims of today's episode and the series really is to normalize taboo conversations and to normalize the fact that we may not be the best person or the only person to take care of ourselves. My understanding is that most therapists and counselors would need to go for therapy. Do you do your own therapy or do you have someone help you?
No. I don't do my own therapy. That would be the worst idea in the whole world. I do have my own therapist. I know I just said, you don't have to be in therapy forever. Now what I'm about to say is going to sound like I've been in therapy forever, but I've been seeing my therapist since 2012. I mean, I used to see her once a week, and then for a period of time I was seeing her once every 2 weeks because life felt completely unmanageable for a period of time in my life. And then it dropped down and I didn't see her for a while. Then I went back and now I see her when I need to see her. And so part of my journey, I learned a lot from going to therapy, a lot about myself. I said to my therapist actually about 1.5 years ago, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. For a period of time, she helped keep me alive. And, I'm a very optimistic, hopeful person. So being in that space was a huge shock for me. And in the last year, my whole life has turned upside down. And if I hadn't had the therapy that I had all those years ago, I would be in a much, much worse space emotionally than I am now. And now I've been able, in the last year, I've been able to see her every so often. And I've been able to do my own stuff that I know works for me. And part of my job as a therapist is, I hold space for other people all the time. And so I need my own person to hold that space for me. That helps make me a good therapist, to have my own therapy. And it's absolutely invaluable.
This idea of therapy and buzzwords like care and well-being and mental health has become quite a commonplace these days. And within the art scene, there are also artists who take care work as a topic of investigation or even as a form in their work. And of course, you have been doing care work before and after your certification as a counsellor. What do you think is the key difference between care work done by an uncertified artist like myself and care work done by a certified professional?
So that's a good question. Like, I've been thinking about that. I think part of it is the depth, maybe, that you can go with. I mean, ideally, you can go with somebody who's certified, or the kind of processes or modalities that they may use, which will be different to somebody who maybe doesn't have that training or that understanding. I don't think either one has more or less value. You know, I think some of the stuff that is happening now is so wonderful, you know, and I wish that had been around when I first kind of started on this journey. I think just generally some of the things to maybe bear in mind are things like boundaries and how much people are able to give of themselves, like people who are doing this care work, you know, am I able to be aware of how much I'm giving? Do I have support myself? Do I have boundaries around the kind of care and what kind of, or how much I'm giving, how much care I'm giving and when? Can I recognize that if there is stuff that feels like it's beyond my ability to care, do I have people that I can refer people onto for maybe a deep care if they need, or more regular or longer term care? You know, I think there is value in community caring for community, right? You have a group of people who really understand the intricacies of what it means to be an artist. And so if they have the space to be able to offer that care in all of these different ways, you know, like Citrus Fest was, I think, a couple of weekends ago, and they're fantastic. I mean, I did some stuff with them in the beginning, and, you know, the program that they put together was great. They're able to support artists without an artist having to explain what they do, what that means, what that looks like. They can just come together and go, okay, these are some of the things we can think about. Or I'm going to sit here and listen to you tell me what you need, and I'm going to see if I can craft something that can support you in the area that you need support in, which I think is invaluable. And so long as you can recognize that there are certain limitations to what you do. I mean, even for me, there are certain limitations to what I do. And if I can't, I will refer you on. Or I'll refer you to somebody else, or I'll say, okay, this, you know, how about you also work with this person, you know, about like cheating on your therapist, right? Like, you know, I've seen people who see me and see somebody else, and that's okay because we offered them different things. And if a therapist ever feels like you're cheating on them, that's their problem, not yours. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So if I were to summarize the difference, the key differences between care work by an artist and care work by a certified counsellor, the certified counsellor would be able to offer more depth and perhaps accountability, so that if something goes wrong, you can blame this person. How can it happen? You're a professional. Whereas the artist who offers care work might be able to plug some of the gaps and new areas of needs, mental health, and possibly the two perspectives could be looking out for each other and learning across the boundaries. Today's session is quite a privileged one. I mean, art itself is a privilege. Being able to be aware of therapy and issues of mental health is also a privilege. Often when we are in the midst of working as an artist, we might not be conscious of many things that could be crumbling around us, right? Fire, you know that meme, right?
Yeah.
How do you think artists can strike some sort of balance between their artistic pursuit and self-preservation? And of course, it's not a black and white thing, right?
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if actually, you know, for some people, their artist pursuit is part of self-preservation. Right?
So that's like one way, right?
Yeah.
For the artist not to think of this as two separate things.
And I guess also so that one doesn't completely like encompass the other or envelop the other, right? Like, I guess my artistic pursuits are not the reason I am alive or the sole purpose of me being alive, you know, so that that bit hasn't subsumed the other. But can I recognize that my art can give me life and can give me strength and hope and courage, but so can all of these other aspects of my life and all these other avenues. And if I don't know what those other avenues look like, because it feels like my art is the only reason I am alive, then can I actively go and look for those and bring some awareness into the other things that bring me joy, or the other things that offer me just like these like glimmers of these little moments, so that the artistic pursuit or endeavor doesn't become the only thing that is going on in my life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we're talking about always not just limiting ourselves to two terms, self and work, but to have a third term that mediates and hopefully complements and helps to heal or recover the artist from the work.
And maybe it's not just one third thing, right? Maybe it's a bunch of other like things. When it's not, we're not just us and our work. We're complex beings, just to bring it back to that.
Nice.
Thanks. It just came to me. But you know, we are complex beings, and we do need more than just work, you know, and even as people who are really passionate about what it is that we do, we need more than just that in order to be able to enrich our lives in lots of different ways, and in order for us to be able to keep going. What are the many different things that we can draw on in our lives? Can we recognize with curiosity and with compassion that we are complex beings, and that our complexity is wonderful, and it's one of the things that offers us both a uniqueness but also a connection to other people. And our complexity is made up or exists because of how we grew up and the context in which we lived in and everything. And when we can have curiosity around that and compassion for ourselves around that and for the other people in our lives, then we really do begin to see that life is more than just us and one other thing. You know what I mean?
Yes. I'd like to end with this final question about advice. And we've heard so much wisdom and insights from you already, but if you were to give only one piece of advice for artists who are interested in managing their artistic complexes or complexes of any kind, what would that piece of advice be?
So I really don't like giving advice. I don't like taking advice. I don't like people when people give me advice, I'm like, oh my God, I know what to do, thanks. Like, don't tell me what to do. Instead of advice, maybe I can offer a question. Are there things that you can do that would bring a little bit more ease and space into your life? Are there people that you connect with, that you feel safe around, that you feel that you can share things with, that bring joy into your life? Is there something that stops you from accessing that? And if so, is this something that you would like to maybe move and change? Do you feel like you can do this on your own, or would you like to do this with somebody else?
Very nice. You're hired.
Oh, thanks.
I'll be booking a session soon. I understand that you are open for booking on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and every other Saturday.
Yeah. But my schedule is, yes. So that's when I see clients. I keep Tuesdays for my creative practice, at the moment also known as admin. And I'm very strict around like certain other like boundaries. But yeah, I mean, people can, you can always get in touch with me and like either like via email or Instagram or whatever.
What a great way to end today's episode. where we expounded on artists' psychologies. Together with the previous episode, where we talked about artists and their personal financing, as well as the first episode where we talked about how the artist studio could be conducive yet lacking in the Singapore arts ecosystem. This episode on artists' mental health completes the series Multiplexes, which really is about normalizing conversations around quite obvious and important issues surrounding conditions as well as the environment for creative practices. I hope that the episode and the series has offered insights and food for thought for your exploration about infrastructure, socioeconomic systems, as well as psychological structures around a creative practice. If you have any questions or views that you would like to make, please put them in the comments section below. Thank you, Rosie, for your time and your insights. Thank you, viewers, for your time and for viewing and being with us. I'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.